Must calculate likelihood of victory. Advancing. Next round. Group stage. Goal difference. Calculate it all. Who did what? Crunch the numbers. Wales. Why is Turkey so bad? Just kidding. I hired somebody that was really good at Excel to crunch the numbers. You may have seen the video where I simulated Euro 2020 100 times on Football Manager, and we had a lot of interesting discoveries, a lot of which turned out to be kind of wrong. When Turkey does well, they do very well. They led this group in average group position at 2.01, which is actually like top 5 in the entire simulation. Yeah, no explanation for that one. Football Manager loved Turkey. But what we did get over these 100 simulations is a fairly clear picture about who is expected to do well and who wasn't expected to do well, what was likely and what was unlikely. So after the tournament finished, we sat back down and crunch the numbers. And I can't stress this enough. I did not crunch the numbers. I am incapable of crunching the numbers. The way we'll look at this is first we'll go through the group stage. There were 9 matches in the group stage that deviated more than half a goal difference from where they should have gone, based on the average goal difference of each team. Are you with me? Then we'll go to the knockout stages and talk about the 5 matches that were least likely to happen the way that they did. And this starts with the 9th match in the group stage. The 9th that was classified as highly unlikely. It was Slovakia 2, Poland 1. Now, what we noticed from the simulations pretty much immediately is that Slovakia was one of the few teams that was just disliked by Football Manager, in the same category as Wales, which obviously didn't end up happening. And strangely enough, the Czech Republic, which also didn't end up happening. So Football Manager was a lot worse at predicting who was supposed to be bad than who was supposed to be good. Poland was a bit of a darling of the simulations in the same way that Turkey was, a team that was given more talent credit in Football Manager than you would have thought. Poland was obviously the expected winner and ended up losing in a 0.62 deviation from the expected result, which compared to some of our top matches on this list is nothing. The 8th one, Spain won, Poland won. This was 0.68 off of the expected goal difference from these teams throughout the course of the group, which means that Spain was just considered that much better by Slovakia in the simulations. It doesn't even matter. Number 7, and this one is a caveat. It's Finland 1, Denmark nothing. There's a whole lot of other things going on that probably contributed to this result, and Denmark obviously ended up having a great tournament, and I'm glad Christian Eriksen is super okay, but this was 0.82 away from the expected goal difference. Finland was not supposed to be able to win this game, not even really get close to it. Number 6, the greatest win in the history of Scotland, 0-0 against England. This is the first time we clear 1. This was actually a whole goal difference deviation from the average that we found between these two teams. When I say something like that, it's because you take the goal difference that was averaged over the 100 simulations, you divide it by 3. You're able to match that goal difference up against the other teams in the group as their average goal difference per match. England's was on average much higher, but Scotland managed to keep them out of the back of the net. So, flower of Scotland, when will we see your like again? Number 5, Croatia 1, Czech Republic 1. Yes, that's how bad the Czech Republic was considered in the 100 simulations, that a draw with Croatia was a 1.12 deviation from where these teams were supposed to be. Essentially the same level as a Scotland-England draw. By 0.02, it was worse for Croatia. Better for Czechia. 4th, and this is where things get interesting, is Switzerland was a darling of the simulations. Wales, not so much. So Wales 1, Switzerland 1, was the 4th biggest deviation in the entire group stages. Switzerland was the expected winner by 2 goals. 2.05. This is a whole other category of upset that we're now looking at. 2.05. Over 2 goal variation. That's not the right word, but we are trying. This is over 2 goal difference out of the way for Wales to be able to cover the gap and get to Switzerland in a 1-1 draw. But this brings us to the top 3, 2 of which should be pretty obvious. 3rd was Hungary, France. A 1-1 draw at a 2.13 goal deviation from the expected result. Hungary pulling out a draw against France 1-1. Not a surprise at all that that was a top 3 upset in the group stages. But ahead of it, at number 2, and one that you definitely didn't think of because the way that the team looked at the time, was Wales 2, Turkey nothing. This was a 2.44 goal deviation from where it should have been, according to the 100 simulations. Obviously, this is where it should have been because Wales won 2-0. I'm saying Turkey being a darling here definitely helps out Wales being an absolutely terrible team in the simulations because they're essentially a championship team gallivanting as a major national team. But who am I to speak? I love Gareth Bale, and Wales makes the knockout stage in every international competition they've ever qualified for. All 3 of them. But this had nothing on the biggest upset of the tournament in the group stage, which was Hungary 2, Germany 2. The single most unlikely result in the group stage. A 2.61 deviation from the expected goal difference coming out of this match. 2.61. Hungary and Wales. Congrats on the upsets. Their incredibly poor, consistently poor group stage performances in the simulations made sure to anchor the fact that they could pull off the most unlikely results. And Hungary getting 2 points out of that group obviously qualifies as the most unlikely. But that's all the beginning stuff, right? That's just in the group stages. Well, what about what were the most unlikely things happening in the knockout stages once we get down to the final 16 teams? Well, there's no way to rank this in the way that we could go back to the group stages and rank what the biggest deviations from the norm were in terms of the results. But there are a couple of things that we were able to calculate. One being the chance of both those teams reaching that round of the competition. 2 being the chance of the loser losing when they made that round of the competition, and the chance of the winner progressing when they made that round of the competition. When we look at the first round, every round of 16 match, there were 3 matches that stood out as being a less than 50% chance that those 2 teams would actually even make it to the round of 16. The third being Ukraine and Sweden, checking in at a 43.9% chance that those 2 teams would be able to make it to that point of the competition. But that was only the third least likely matchup in the round of 16. There were 2 well ahead of it. At 29.2% in second place is the Netherlands and Czechia. And it's not just the fact that the Czech Republic was a very unlikely participant in the round of 16. It's also the fact that the Netherlands didn't do incredibly well in the simulations, and it is not wholly unlikely that the Netherlands was going to make the round of 16 and lose, or not make the round of 16 at all, pushing this down to a 29.2% likelihood that both teams would be here. When the Netherlands lost, they actually had a 67% chance of losing if they happened to make the round of 16. So that was dead on the nose. Just losing to Czechia was not what the simulations had in mind. But the least likely matchup in the first round was Denmark and Wales. 16.3% chance that those 2 teams actually qualified for the round of 16. Obviously weighted heavily by Wales being terrible, but Denmark contributing as well, despite the fact that they were one of the teams that got upset by Finland. They were still projected to finish in a tug of war for second place, next to Russia in their group, behind Belgium, of course, just to save you the trouble of having to look it up. Rather predictably, the most likely quarterfinal matchup was Belgium and Italy at 23.4% of the time that those teams would make it to that stage of the competition. Then you get into the next category, which is Spain and Switzerland, was actually a 15.7% likelihood to have both of those teams in the quarterfinals. So shout out to Switzerland for carrying that number a little bit. England and Ukraine was at 13.6% likelihood to both get to that round of the competition, weighed down heavily by Ukraine. And then Czech Republic and Denmark at an incredible 4.6% likelihood that those 2 teams would make it to the quarterfinal at the same time. In the semifinals, Italy and Spain was an 8.8% chance for them to get to the semis at the same time, while England and Denmark was a 2.6% chance. In less than 3 simulations out of 100 were you able to get Denmark and England into the semifinals at the same time. And there was only a 3% chance of the England-Italy final that we were given. One of the other interesting things, I think, is what was the chance of the loser losing in the round of 16? And what was the chance of that loser losing that was like a significant number. On the one end of the scale, Wales making the round of 16 had a 95% chance of losing in the round of 16. 4-0 would kind of bear that out. But what were the least likely teams to lose in the round of 16 given the simulations? Let's go with the top 5 least likely teams to lose. Obviously, that's more than half of the teams that lost, but it starts with Sweden. They had a 58% chance to lose if they got to the round of 16. But fourth is probably the one that's going to surprise you the most, because while the simulations obviously missed a few things, they obviously got a few things, like the Netherlands and France. France had a 52% chance to lose after making the round of 16, and they lost. Which brings us to the top 3 of the teams that were actually not supposed to lose in this round, which would be Croatia. 44% chance to lose in this round, and bumped by Spain, obviously, in extra time. England beating Germany. Germany only had a 34% chance of getting knocked out in this round. And then Portugal, despite the fact that it was probably going to end up with a tough draw, just a 27% chance of losing in the round of 16. Shout out to Belgium. These are the sorts of things that the draw obviously can help with from time to time to create these unique numbers. Portugal playing against Belgium. Belgium is one of the darlings of the simulation as well. So the fact that those two teams ended up having to play against each other changes the way that those numbers are coming in a little bit, is perhaps a little bit more striking. But going into the tournament, that's where we were. Notably, in the quarterfinals, Belgium only had a 61% chance of not advancing after making it to the quarterfinal. But every team that lost in the quarterfinals was highly likely to lose if they did get to that round. Well, a team like Italy, that obviously advanced and went on to win the whole thing, only had a 25% chance if it made the quarterfinal to advance. The quarterfinals were a big catching point for the teams in these 100 simulations. The highest likelihood to advance out of those quarterfinals was Spain, but just 35% based off the simulations. Denmark had 8% if it made the quarterfinals, in case you were wondering. It's a lot of intense numbers from simulations. What can we take from this? What were the surprise packages? And that's the key here, is that Italy was not the most likely team to go on and win the title. It just a 3% chance to see this final between Italy and England. And Italy, given it made it to the final, only had a 40% chance of actually winning the final. England had a 50% chance of losing based off the percentages in the 100 simulations once they got to that point. The clear surprise packages were, unsurprisingly, Denmark. You had the Czech Republic, Wales getting all the way to the final, and Hungary being able to take points off people in the group stages. You also had teams that were expected to do better or maybe struggle in a way that they did, but the public didn't necessarily expect. France losing was not a huge surprise in the round of 16. Switzerland doing well was also not a huge surprise. Neither was Croatia taking Spain the distance. They look like a likely team to get at least to the quarterfinals of the tournament. Netherlands going out as well was not considered a huge surprise, although the fact that they lost to Czechia would be considered one of the biggest surprises of the entire tournament. What's more important than the numbers is the memories we made along the way. Just kidding. These 100 simulations things are super cool, and we're going to do them for some leagues as we get ready for the league season. But all right, Euros, I am done with thee. Congrats to the Italians. I do love a good pasta sauce.